Are you recently retired or nearing retirement? There are so many important decisions if you are, Ryan. We were talking about this the other day that so many people get overwhelmed, right? About what's going on and the decisions that really determine the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life, right?
Totally.
And it's one of those, it's almost like somebody doesn't talk about it um in a way that's really going to make sense. It's not necessarily your account's going to talk about what we're going to talk about today, not your CPA, not even most financial advisors. Yet, this one decision that we're going to focus on today, there's so many we could focus on, but it could have a major impact on your retirement savings and how long your money lasts. So, let me ask you a simple question. When you retire, which account should you withdraw from first? Should it be your IRA? Should it be your 401k, your Roth, or even your after tax accounts? That's what we're going to focus on. And Ryan, we were discussing this quite a bit the other day, and it really becomes an important topic. And that's why we just decided we wanted to do that as part of the podcast today, right?
Tyson, here's what's awesome. Literally, after helping tens of thousands of families with retirement questions and giving them information to get the things that they need the most, what we've learned, most people have no idea the order that you should take your withdrawals in retirement. But here's the key, and this is what we want to talk about in the podcast. It does matter. In fact, it matters a whole lot. So, every choice that you make affects other things. For example, your taxes, your Social Security, your investment income, even your Medicare premiums. And so it becomes like a row of dominoes, Tyson. And, one of the first domino falls when that, it's just like think about as a kid setting up the dominoes and watching those fall down. Well, the first domino falls and then the rest fall with it. So this is one of the biggest reasons retirees overpay in taxes, often without ever realizing it. So, Tyson, we were just talking the other day, and by the way, you may notice if you're watching this on video, we have some changes. We just moved into a new office, and I just had a birthday, Tyson. So, guess what that means? I finally need readers, man. This is like talk about one domino falling. It feels like we get in a new office. I have a birthday, and all of a sudden now I have to wear readers on top of that. So
It's like me. I didn't use readers for quite a while just because I wanted to pretend like I didn't need them. And so if you're like me, you probably had a while that you didn't use them even though you needed them.
when everything starts waking up and it's blurry in the morning, and all of a sudden, I can't read what's on the paper, it's probably time to get the readers. So here we are. And what we're going to do is just like the readers are giving me clarity. And let's have a fun conversation. What are we going to talk about today on today's podcast?
Well, we're going to break down what I talked about originally, which is the order you withdraw your money in retirement really does make a huge difference from a tax perspective, from an income perspective, so many things. We'll dive deep into that. We're going to talk about why people get themselves into trouble if they don't think about this. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about a really important strategy that could save everybody listening today. Yes, you, a small fortune in taxes. All of these are going to be really key to helping you retire with confidence, with clarity, and really be able to help you take next steps.
Well, and I think if we just let's start with each one of these three questions because they're really, really powerful. Question number one, why why do withdrawals matter most? Which bucket you take the money from? Why does it matter most than most people think? And Tyson, what we've discovered is most retirees don't realize that how they withdraw the money from their accounts and in what order it could have a bigger impact in retirement than the investments themselves. Because which bucket you're taking it from, it's a big deal. So let's just take a deep dive on this. This is fun.
Yeah, the first thing that I really want to point out here when we talk about why withdrawals matter so much is let's just walk through, for instance, the income bucket. When you think about the income bucket, the very foundation of your income, as we've talked about before, is Social Security. And You need to understand how to maximize that. We help people to understand and simplify Social Security and what they're going to take. But for instance, we were talking to a client just the other day, and the client called in and said, "Look, I've been taking my Social Security for quite a few years, and I just got my new Social Security statement, and there was a lot more money getting pulled out from Medicare premiums than there was the prior year."
Yes.
And so we started talking to the client, and it turns out that they had sold a family cabin last year. And so when Social Security and Medicare looked at this client's taxes, uh, they said, "Well, hey, look, you had some substantial income last year." So what that did was that pushed them into a new tax bracket, which also pushed them into, literally in their case, doubling their Medicare premiums. They had no idea that that was going to happen. We had talked about that when they first retired, that if they ever did sell, and they didn't have a chance to really walk through and talk through the minutia before they sold their cabin. And so as a result, they were caught a little off guard. The good thing about that is that it goes down over a period of time. But this is a great example of how when you take when you withdraw money from Social Security and you have something else, in this case, selling a cabin, it impacted their Medicare premiums. It also impacted their taxes for the prior year, right? We did have a chance to talk all the way through their taxes with them and help them to manage those efficiently. But ultimately, all of this is it creates a cascade effect, a downstream effect on how long your money's going to last, and what happens with your income, your growth, your Medicare, your taxes, all of it, right?
Well, and Tyson, this is where withdrawing from the wrong account first, it could unknowingly push you into a higher tax bracket. And then what you just explained was in this particular case, when they sold the family cabin, what they didn't realize is there was going to be a capital gain.
Yes.
And with the capital gain, what that does is the technical term of it is it's called IRMAA surcharges. That's IRMAA surcharges. And what this does is it throws you into a higher tax bracket because now you have this big capital gain that's coming in, but then it also bumps up that Medicare premium for 2 years. And so, this is not, hey, this is just a one-time event of selling a major asset, but it also you're going to feel that impact for 2 years. And then after 2 years, they're going to reevaluate that because they know that oftentimes it's just a temporary thing. But um, another twist on that we see is, let's say someone decides, hey, I'm going to do some Roth conversions, and they've got $1 million inside of their IRAs and 401ks. Well, what happens is they take this big withdrawal doing a conversion. Let's say they had $1 million and they pull out 250,000. They're going to do this conversion from a traditional IRA over to a Roth. Now all of a sudden that 250,000 gets counted as income because a withdrawal coming out of those buckets, that's just like ordinary income that's coming out here. So that pushes them into a higher tax bracket, number one. And number two, they've got the IRMAA surcharges now that are going to be on their Medicare. So what this effect can have is all of a sudden what you were planning on being able to spend every month, well, your Medicare premiums just increased and taxes took a bigger bite. And all of a sudden you get in this, it's kind of like a dog chasing its tail. You have to start pulling out more money to make sure you have enough to cover your lifestyle. And that's one of the challenges that we see that people, it causes them to run out of money.
And what this really boils down to that you're describing, Ryan, is a lot of times people treat each of their accounts, whether it's their IRA or their 401k or their Social Security or Medicare or whatever it is, their Roth accounts, their brokerage accounts, all of it, they just say, okay, I'm gonna think about Social Security separately and it's in its own bucket. Or I'm gonna think about my 401k that I've spent my entire life building and growing, and I can kind of think about that in its own bucket. And even if somebody says, I'm going to put all of my pre-tax money in one bucket and all my post-tax money in a different bucket, it still doesn't work because all of those things interact with each other. And So that's why we have the B.O.S. retirement blueprint. That's why, preferably before you retire, we can sit down and talk to you and say, let's put some ducks in a row that are going to help you when you retire, that all of this is already being taken into account, and really it's minimizing the impact on each of these, whether it is income or growth or taxes or passing on things to the next generation. All of it is already organized and ready to go.
And Tyson, we kind of broke this down into three mistakes where people get into trouble. And let's walk through some of the. We thought it would be fun to walk through the three common mistakes that we see. Mistake number one is that they start taking too much from their IRAs or 401ks at the wrong time. And the way you think about this is most retirees forget that their traditional IRAs and 401ks, they're fully taxable at the point that you withdraw the money. It's just like ordinary income. So in other words, it's like getting a paycheck. And every dollar that comes out as ordinary income, well, if you take too much in a single year or draw money from these accounts in the wrong order, this is where you could unintentionally increase your taxable income and owe far more than what you were planning on. And this has been uh, helped a little bit by the extension of the 2017 Tax Cut and Job Act that President Trump put in 2017. That was made permanent, and we put permanent in air quotes because our feeling is the next administration, if it's not the Republicans that are elected, it's going to be swing back the other way. There's going to be some changes. It just really seems like we're in this wild swing era of politics, and so this is where you need to plan and be very intentional on how you pull those out. Tyson, what's mistake number two?
Mistake number two, we've kind of alluded to, which is filing for Social Security without coordinating your other withdrawals. Because when you think about it, if you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to take my Social Security, but now I need to start withdrawing money out of my retirement accounts, my IRA or my 401k, what ends up happening is you don't realize that it can push you into a new tax bracket. And what that means in real dollars with Social Security is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits could become taxable. So, if you're getting between you and your spouse $4,000, 85% of that $4,000 could become taxable, which even back in the 80s, most people were not taxed at all on their Social Security. And so one of the things that we help people to do is we say, okay, let's say a couple years before you retire, let's look and see how much you need. And then let's look at the order of how we coordinate these withdrawals. Maybe it's that we start taking some of your pension money first and let your Social Security grow, and then we add some Roth money to it so that it doesn't impact any taxes, because you've already, with your Roth, got post-tax dollars that you can pull out of your Roth. Maybe it's then when you get to, say, 68 years old, we start turning on one of the couple's benefits, but we let the other one grow for a period of time. There's all of these different combinations. If we can coordinate withdrawals, that you'd be surprised how much money you can save in taxes. Then that's what this is. This is really important, because not only do we want to save you money on Social Security benefits, but we also want to save you money on taxes with your IRA, your 401k, anything else that you're using for withdrawals. And it becomes a pretty darn big deal. It literally ends up being hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime in each of these scenarios, just from coordinating what these withdrawals look like.
It's totally true. And I think mistake number three is, as human beings, I think we want to say, what's the easiest way to do this? And so what we start to fall into is these traditional one size rules of thumb. And one that's been around for a long time, a rule of thumb has been, you can take out 4% of your portfolio. Um, and so if you have $1 million, you could take out $40,000 pre-tax and then spend what is post-tax. That was the rule of, hey, I can make it all the way through retirement if I do this. But What this doesn't account for, and this is why there was an article recently from Bankrate that said the 4% rule is so 1994. Tyson, you and I had hair in 1994, right?
Hey, we were here a lot longer than 1984, but still.
Well, and what it basically says is, you know, in his latest book, um, Bengen says, hey, it doesn't simply tweak the original number. He reframes how retirees should think about this process. That the 4% rule, and this is the guy who created the 4% rule. He said it was never intended to set it and forget it like a magic formula. This is the problem with rules of thumb. Instead, he said he wants people to understand that a safe withdrawal rate depends on timing, market conditions, inflation, and personal decisions. So, you know, this is where you need to really customize. If you're going to, B.O.S S is an acronym. Our company name stands for Build the Optimal System of Security. This is what we've learned, that you really need to customize this, because what we see, for example, when you just start saying, hey, I can take out 4%. We see this a lot from the guys who like the spreadsheets, the engineers, the accountants, and they just plug this in and say, oh, I'm going to be just fine in retirement. I've got, $1.5 million. I'm going to be just fine. But what they're not taking into consideration is, what about future tax increases? We hardly ever in those spreadsheets see inflation. And we certainly don't see stock market volatility. So, what happens if all of a sudden, we've had this bull market going on for so long now, only little periods where the market's dropped and then it comes roaring back up. What happens if we have another 2008 or 2001 event where the markets are down? I mean, you think about 2001, we pretty much had a decade of nothing. Um, with all the gains were wiped out, and then the market just kind of went sideways. Folks, history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does rhyme. I mean, if you take a look at where we've been since 2009, folks, there's a reckoning day coming when we will have a major downturn. And what happens if that's right as you retire? What happens if you had $1 million and all of a sudden the market goes down 50% and your $1 million become 500,000 right as you go out and retire? Man, this is where it can be really devastating on a portfolio.
Yeah, it's big. And this leads to mistake number 4, Ryan, which is forgetting how today's withdrawals impact future required minimum distributions. So there's a lot of confusion going on right now with what age you take required minimum distributions, how you take them. And let me talk about this for just a second. Right now, required minimum distribution age is 73
Mm-hmm.
for those who turned 72 after 2022. So, in other words, if you turned 72 after 2022, 73 is when you start needing to pull required minimum distributions out. And it's going to increase to 74 and later down the road 75. That's why there's all this confusion around it. But let me simplify all this for you. One of the goals at B.O.S Retirement Solutions and Advisors is to help you to not have to worry about required minimum distributions because we take care of the tax up front. And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. But the opposite of what we're talking about today with taking all the RMDs and getting rid of those is there's a lot of advisors out there who say, hey, look, when you start pulling money out of your 401ks or IRAs or other retirement accounts, you're going to have to start paying taxes on it. So let's push down the road. Let's just take Social Security, maybe some rental income, and let's not start taking anything out of a retirement account until you hit required minimum distribution age. And again, 73 for most of you listening right now. Well, the problem with that is exactly what we talked about with mistake number 4, forgetting how today's withdrawals could impact your RMDs. Because if you kick the can down the road and say, I'm just going to wait to pull any money out of my retirement accounts until I get to age 73, what ends up happening is that you lose all control over how much you're paying taxes, because now the government, once you get to required minimum distribution age, the government starts to mandate based off of your age how much you're forced to withdraw, from all of those retirement accounts, whether you need the money or not, and whether the market is up or down. And so that can actually change how long your money's going to last, how much you have left in those retirement buckets. And so here's the key takeaway with all of this that we're talking about with these 4 mistakes right now. None of your withdrawal decisions should happen in a vacuum. Each one of these decisions impacts the next decision. And without coordinating, whether it's Social Security or your IRAs or your 401ks or your Medicare, one wrong move could set off a chain reaction that could cost far more than you ever realize. And that's why we're here to help, is because we've been able to help thousands upon thousands of people make an informed decision about all of these ways of looking at retirement to minimize and maximize at the same time everything that you're doing. So, Ryan, with all of that, this really takes us into strategy number 3 that could save people a fortune. Let's talk about how this all works in coordinated fashion.
Well, this is the natural thing, right? If we've identified these mistakes, what do you need to do to make sure that you have a strategy that could prevent those mistakes? And, this is where you put more money back into your pocket. And what we call this is we call it a coordinated withdrawal strategy. And the purpose of this is to prevent the mistakes. And so instead of just looking like today at this very moment, which bucket should I take money from? We look at it and say, well, let's look over the next 10, 20, or even 30 years. We always plan until age 100. Now, you may not live that long, but what we want to make sure is that you're not 85 years old, full of life and flat broke because you didn't have these strategies in place. And so this coordinated withdrawal strategy, here's the simple goal. Number one of the biggest needle movers is managing your tax brackets. So you ought to be looking at the decision that I make today and in 10 years and in 20 years, how can that impact tax brackets? Number 2 is you really want to focus on how can I reduce the taxes from my IRAs or 401ks, and how can I minimize this? How can I do this in a way to minimize those Medicare surcharges, the IRMAA surcharges, and then also bring in how do I reduce the taxes on my Social Security? Because what this does is you want to avoid creating unnecessarily large required minimum distributions, Tyson, that you talked about later on during retirement. And for most people, what happens is, it's one of those things that they think, oh, I'll get around to this later. And then later comes and they never work on it. And then all of a sudden they're in a scenario where they just have to take these large withdrawals and their Social Security is being impacted and their Medicare is being impacted. And, I think of all of the thousands of people that we've helped. And the biggest thing is you don't need millions of dollars to benefit from a strategy like this.
This is really important right here.
Yeah. Kind of the mark that we look at is if you've saved at least $300,000 for retirement, you can really start to coordinate a lot. Why 300,000? Well, because below that amount, what happens is you're doing anything you can just to survive during retirement. And so the real needle mover starts around this $300,000 mark, and having a plan for withdrawals, make sure that you have a plan to help make more money out of your own situation. And this is one of those areas that it literally could be a difference of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, man, have a strategy. Have a strategy. Don't just leave this to chance. Take action and make sure that you've got a good strategy.
Well, and I love it. And really what this boils down to is it's not a do-it-yourself project. This is not something that you can just go gather a little bit of information and then magically make the right moves, whether it's with Social Security or whether it's taxes or withdrawal strategies. It's all so coordinated, and you need somebody on your side to help you make those decisions. And so as we end the show today, you got to think about when you think about withdrawing money in retirement, it really makes a huge difference in how you take your withdrawals. And because of that, it could save you a huge amount of money in your taxes. It could be taxes on your Social Security. It could be saving you money on what you pay in Medicare premiums, like the example that we showed. Ultimately, what this all boils down to is how long is your money going to last? And that's why when we talk about tax planning, retirement tax planning could end up being one of the single most important tools that you ever think about and utilize in your retirement. And it's not necessarily what your accountant or CPA does. They're really good at looking backwards. They report history when you file your taxes. But what we're talking about today is retirement tax planning that looks forward 20, 30, even 40 years into the future so that you can save money for the rest of your life. So if you'd like to learn how much money you could save when you retire, we'd love to offer you, our podcast listeners, our customized B.O.S. retirement tax savings analysis. This isn't some off-the-shelf report. It's completely customized to your specific situation and will help you to discover how much you could pay less in taxes, not only now, but into the future with some simple proven tax strategies. Ryan, talk about how a lot of firms usually charge for this.
Most firms, you're going to write and pay for a planning firm, but really, the good news is at our firm, we believe in adding value first. And so this is one of those things that you can see, man, if I had saved $300,000 for retirement and all of a sudden I can save $150,000 in retirement taxes, wouldn't that be worth just finding that out? It doesn't cost you anything. And that's where, you can give us a call right now, 800-769-7550. And that number is 800-769-7550. Just give us a call. We'll run this for you, give you information, because we believe that good information to good people, you can make great retirement decisions. So we just want to thank you for joining us today. And, we're looking forward to just offering value. And that's why we spend so much time on education, is just to help you make great decisions. And it's been a great podcast today, Tyson. Good topic. And we'll see everyone on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.